Hello and welcome to Module 3, Data-Driven Decision Making. Today we're going to look at what is a data cycle, why are data cycles important, and why are assessments important. And is it important for the assessment to correspond to the purpose? So I want you to take a look at this man in a boat. It represents something going on that's considered cyclic or reactive, data-driven, and proactive. So let's take a deeper look. In the cyclic, a hole in the boat causes it to take on water. You bail water with a bucket as it enters. Water is coming in faster than he can bail. The sailor sees the loss, cause, and the boat sinks. Okay? Reactive. A hole in the boat causes it to take on water. You buy more buckets and hire more bailers. Water is coming in at the same rate it is being bailed. Eventually, the sailor tires of working with no visible progress. New water and more new water. So then we have the data-driven. Okay, so there's a hole in the boat that causes it to take on water. You buy a data tracking system and hire a manager and trainer. You track the amount of water entering and exiting the boat. So then what do you think is going to happen? The sailor loses his mission, now tracks water instead of direction. Right? Same water, new water. So now let's look at proactive. There's a hole in the boat, causes it to take on water. You gather materials and make the problem a priority. You fix the hole in the boat, and then the sailor returns to doing what he is meant to do, and that is sailing. All right, so now let's take a look at this from a school perspective. In cyclic, a student has fallen behind academically. The student enters intervention and no additional assessments. The interventions are general, unmatched to the student. The student makes less than adequate progress. So you have the same and new students. All right? Reactive. The student has fallen behind academically. The student enters intervention and takes assessments. The interventions are needs-specific and research-based. The student begins to progress toward the standard. So what's happening in this one? We're following a cycle, right? The student has fallen behind academically, and they are making some progress, right? Now, data-driven. The student shows difficulty through screening. The student enters data tracking system and intervention, but no additional assessment. Interventions are general and unmatched to the student. The student makes less than adequate progress, but the data is recorded. Okay, same in new students. So now let's look at proactive. Students receive need-specific instruction based on diagnostic assessments. Fewer students fall behind academically. Interventions are matched to the student need, and need-specific interventions allow for high percent to progress toward the standard. So I think where a lot of schools are is at that reactive phase. We might call us in between reactive and data and some proactive. We may fall in some of those categories. Hopefully none of us are in that cyclic. Do you have a diagnosis that is more affordable? I think that's how we feel sometimes. We still don't have a diagnosis for your rash, so we're going to rub some more money on it and see what happens. It's kind of how we feel sometimes at the doctor's office. All right, so thinking about assessment and the purpose of assessment, looking at these pictures, and by the way, I forgot to do a disclaimer here. Some of the slides in Module 2 and Module 3 I took from the Tennessee Department of Education's PDIG training, and they were created by Kate Martin, and I just want to give her credit for the resource. So what is assessment? So think about these pictures and which one to use speaks out. If there's not one that speaks out, then how would you visually describe assessment? For me, I look at assessment, in several different ways. I like the little thumbs up, thumb down for a quick check. I also liked the success gauge, kind of measures where you are based on where you need to be. I also like the blueprint. The blueprint's very important because an assessment can lead you or give you what you need to make whatever skill, whatever you're working towards successful. So the word assessment comes from Latin, meaning to sit beside and beside. I really think that's interesting because the morphology of the word can be used in several different contexts. So what are the types of assessment? We have screening assessments. They're standardized, shallow, quick measures. And these are some examples: Ames-Webb, STAR, the Woodcock-Johnson version 4, the GORT 4. Those are screeners. Then we have diagnostic assessments based on need, gives you a level, lets you know how to funnel that information. So some examples of those are the WISC, the QRI, and the PASS, which is a screener, which is a diagnostic screener for phonics and phonemic awareness. Then we have progress monitoring. So you have to think about how different progress monitoring needs to be between the screening and the diagnostic. So in progress monitoring, it is universal. So there's a picture of a stethoscope there. So we know that stethoscope means that our heart should be beating at so many beats per minute in a range. And if I'm doing progress monitoring, then I should be in that range. And if I'm out of the range, then there has to be some kind of intervention done. The same with the blood sugar, glucose meter there. you're checking to see where your glucose is at. So some screeners that do that, AimsWeb, STAR now has a progress monitoring piece. It is needs-based, and it's a formative piece that helps you go back into that cycle to meet the needs of the students. So the purpose of the screener is to alert you. It's like casting out a net. The screener is going to alert you. The diagnostic piece is going to help you shape your instruction. And the progress monitoring piece helps you adjust your instruction or adjust what you're doing to meet the needs. All right, so thinking on deeper, how can we help our teachers? And how do we support them? Do our teachers feel supported? How do you know? How often do you survey teachers? And in the climate of where we are now, I know that a lot of this probably can't go on. You probably don't want to know what your teachers think. But here's an example of a data audit for professional learning. And it's just some really quick things about, there's some district initiatives and how they would rate the implementation on a scale of 0 to 4. So any kind of survey could be done at the beginning of an implementation cycle, just to give you a good feel for where you are. Obviously, here on this particular example, I would say that we're moving toward the right direction in leadership practices, but it looks like professional development is lagging quite a bit. And none of those are where you want them to be, because you're striving to be at a 4. So obviously, lots of work to be done according to this example. So school leaders who focus on students' achievement and instructional strategies are the most effective. And that's John Hattie, 2009. And this also comes from some of his research, where how to improve student learning. You can get a 0.9 improvement, which is significant when you are promoting and participating in teacher learning. Direct involvement in support and evaluation of teaching through frequent classroom visits with focused feedback also gets you a 0.7 increase. So those things are really important to schools and how schools move. And if you're not familiar with John Hattie, he does mega research. He doesn't just take one school or one district or one state or one country. His research is global. So very reliable data source there when we look at what he posts up. All right, so what kind of support system do you want to maintain? Do you want to maintain something that looks like it's up on a toothpick? Maybe the one with the concrete pillars under it? Or do you want to be the one holding it up? Love that picture. That guy, definitely play on a photo. But I think we feel that way sometimes when we are trying to make improvements. So there's 3 supports to using data. 3 factors must be in place to use data to improve instruction. The first one, use of a well-defined school improvement process. 2, a cultural shift to a learning organization in which instruction is continually examined and improved. And that comes from our DataWise text. And then 3, reform must take place close to the classroom. It's not going to happen if the teachers aren't doing it and there's not buy-in. So part of Tennessee education reform, I think education and reform are two words that usually go in the same sentence because we are always moving ourselves to try to improve. So ongoing. It's always going to be ongoing. There's always going to be something coming down the pike. We just have to decide if we need it, how we're going to use it, if we use it, how we're going to monitor the results from it. There's always going to be standards, should be. There's always going to be assessments. Again, there should be. Teacher evaluation, that's just part of it. My philosophy on that is that teacher evaluation should be used to help grow teachers. I think where we are in our country, our state, I know in my county, there is an ongoing need for literacy initiatives, whether that be actually teaching reading in the lower primary or reading across the curriculum in middle and high school. Perhaps there should be a value-added reset. I know TVAS is a big discussion, but if there is value and we use it correctly, I think it is a good tool. Instructional coaches, some districts have them, some don't. Principal leadership, that's always should be at the top of the plane, and then the LOE, the teacher level of effectiveness. So if we make any further comments about education reform, I could take up the rest of your day and into tomorrow because it is simply ongoing. So looking at cycles and thinking about cycles, this is the DataWise cycle, and it begins with organizing for collaborative work, building an assessment literacy, creating a data overview, digging into student data, examining instruction, developing an action plan, planning to assess progress, and then acting and assessing. And then as that cycle moves back through, you may have to reorganize for collaborative work and build assessment literacy. But basically the way this arrow is pointing, you can go right into going back to creating a data overview. After you have acted and you have assessed, then you would create a data overview and then move back around in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So working through the process, this is one of those acronyms that follow educators around, but it's an LCP, a learner-centered problem. So when you look at school improvement and you look at school improvement plans, there should be some type of learner-centered problem addressed. And then the goal for that problem is going to be addressed actually in the plan of where you are and where you want to be. So the students at XYZ school are able to identify details but struggle to support their answers with accurate evidence. Okay? So the problem of practice comes out that teachers at XYZ school do not regularly ask students to explain their answers in writing. So if we think about that as a whole, then we can actually, I'll go back to the learner-centered problem. If the students are never asked to give that evidence, then they're not going to be able to support their answers with evidence. Okay, so how do I identify a learner-centered problem? So here are some examples. In an elementary setting, students have difficulty drawing text-based inferences when reading. Students are unable to read increasingly more sophisticated levels of text. So those are two examples in an elementary setting. In a middle setting, students struggle when asked to solve multi-step math problems. Students have difficulty isolating key scientific concepts when reading nonfiction text. Two more examples at the high school level. Students have difficulty taking a critical stance, explaining the reasoning behind their stance, and supporting their stance with evidence. And then students have trouble applying algebraic reasoning skills, particularly on open-ended questions. So these are examples or samples of learner-centered problems. So thinking through the cycle, you select a problem to focus on through which you can make a meaningful difference in student learning for many students. So you're thinking about your data, you identify the learner-centered problem, and then you have to understand what that looks like. Okay, so matching the diagnosis to the data. So we're going to take a look. Incoming fifth grader. His name is Jack. He was in the 12th percentile on the spring benchmark. In TN Ready, he was approaching when he was in fourth grade. In the ELA classroom, his average is 90%. On AimsWeb, his oral reading fluency is 45 words per minute. And if you know anything, by fifth grade, they should be moving up toward that 180, 200 words a minute on that type of oral reading fluency test. So obviously, he's in deep trouble as far as his words per minute are concerned. So obviously, Jack has an IEP, and his goal is to increase fluency. Okay, so we base that goal on what we see here. That he can only read 45 words a minute, but he does great in the classroom. He was approaching on TN Ready. And then on the spring benchmark, he was in the 12th percentile on the screener. What did the screener really tell us about him? We don't really know. So here is what I like to say. We have to draw a line in the sand because we have to have more information in order to be able to help Jack. What exactly is influencing his fluency? So he reads haltingly. That means that he's reading stutter-like. It's not smooth. For him, spelling is difficult. He's an excellent critical thinker, which obviously one thing we can tell about Jack is that he has excellent critical thinking skills because he's able to get a classroom average of 90%. Maybe he's taking advantage of some accommodations, but still he's doing good in the classroom. He feels intimidated by too much text. His sight word vocabulary is only one grade level behind, which that's not bad, really. He avoids risk. He sees what he reads, so that means that he is visualizing what he does read. He phrases well when words are known. He spells without vowels. Context clues make reading easier for him. He guesses at words. He skips lines when reading, and he misses short and long vowel sounds. All right. Now we have a lot more information about Jack as a reader. And I don't expect any you all to, if you teach reading and if you've taught in lower elementary, you're going to look at that and know exactly what's going on with Jack. Jack is not phonemically aware. He missed out on phonemic awareness, and that's harsh when you think about Jack coming into 5th grade. But obviously, if he's a good critical thinker, he sees what he reads, he can visualize. He uses context clues. He's got great coping skills, but he doesn't have that foundational piece. He is not hearing short and long vowel sounds. He doesn't hear them. So as he's become older, he's used all his coping skills to get where he's at, but it's very difficult for him. So if I'm a SPED teacher, if I'm an inclusion teacher, if I'm his teacher, if I'm his 5th grade teacher, something that I know that we need to work on in the classroom, outside the classroom, is that basic foundational skill piece, starting with phonemic awareness. He has to be able to discriminate those sounds. So again, the major clues in that are that he is spelling without vowels, that he misses short and long vowel sounds. So that is a huge indicator that he is not hearing them. So one thing that we could do to help Jack is to then work on those foundational skill pieces, which include phonemic awareness and basic phonics. Okay, so now let's look at Jill, who's an incoming 10th grader. Her spring benchmark screener, she was in the 7th percentile. EOC English 1, she scored 65%, which, that's not bad. Her English 1 class average is 85%. Her IEP goal just simply says that we're going to improve her reading skills. Okay. On the Woodcock-Johnson, her broad reading is in the 2nd percentile. Okay, so we're going to draw that line in the sand here for Jill. And we have to ask ourselves, what do we know about Jill as a reader? And if I was in a face-to-face class with you, I would hope that your response would be, not much. What we're looking at does not really tell us what we know about Jill as a reader. So here's some things we do know about Jill. She avoids reading. She's quiet in class. She has a strong sight word vocabulary for both reading and spelling. She reads about 130 words per minute, which, honestly, you want them to be close to the 180, 200 range, but, that's not a terrible word per minute range, even for an adult. Explicit comprehension is easier than explicit. Okay? Strong background knowledge, but only with experiences. Writing is often unorganized. Abandons books consistently. She retells out of sequence with little detail. Makes as many errors in context as in isolation. Substitutes nonsense words. So when she's reading, if she's reading aloud, she just makes up words. Has difficulty describing the look of the text. And she draws heavily on background knowledge to answer explicit questions. Okay, so what do we know about Jill as a reader? She's got some things going on here, and what we know is that she retails out of sequence. So what she's doing, anything that's explicit comes right directly from the text. Okay, so if I want to do what happened first, next, last, give a summary, those are the type of explicit comprehension things that come directly out of a text. What she seems to do is her implicit comprehension is easier because she draws heavily on her own background knowledge. So she's almost at the inferencing level when she reads, but she's missing, you can miss the whole point of a text if you are really not looking deeply into the text, which you do for explicit comprehension. So instead of saying that I've got a goal for her as either as her teacher, her inclusion teacher, the special education teacher, her English 2 teacher, I want to help her improve her reading skills. How? I see that she needs to improve them, obviously, but how am I going to do it? Well, the answer is simple here. We're going to work on those lower level comprehension skills, which are called explicit. She needs a lot of work. Somewhere along the line, she did not get enough work or assistance or help or thorough understanding of restating the sequence of a story, looking at the events, looking back in a text for evidence, all those things that are explicit to comprehension. So that's how we would help Jill. And we wouldn't say that she just needs to improve her reading skills. So, that should be like a red flag when you see something like that. All right, so what else do we need to know? Once we have drafted a learner-centered problem, we need to gather more information to help us write an instructional goal. And if you did your TVAS assignment already, these were some perspectives from a teacher that, and I'm going to tie this back to Jack and Jill, that a teacher's perspective, they're usually confused, no clarity has been provided, scores do not benefit a specialist such as a SPED teacher, value added has never encouraged happiness. Many Tennessee teachers have to take a school-wide score, and that's true, they do. And then how can they measure my effectiveness when the content is vastly different between grade levels? And that's just where we are. That's just how it is. The thing about it is, Half a Century Wasted is an article, and I think I referred to that when I was speaking in Module 2. So if you haven't read that yet, you really need to read it because it talks about how you can take the criterion test and then build that TVAS model to make sure that you're growing students. This is real important. So think about that for a second. And then let's go back and think about our friend Jack and our friend Jill. It's real easy for us to look at something on the surface level. So all those teacher perspective things that come from your TVAS assignment or your TVAS survey, all that's really important, but you really have to take a deeper look into it to make sure that you understand what's going on with it as you move forward. So something that I hope that you got out of this part of the module is that the whole data process is a cycle. You have to dig deeper. Remember, if you are data driven, it doesn't mean that you're just going to hire more some consulting firm to come in and analyze your data for you. It doesn't work like that. It really is a culmination of all of that. It is a cycle. It is reactive.